The sky was gray in that particular way that didn't just signal rain. It pressed on your shoulders, made the air heavier. The cold breeze off the bay cut through my coat, even though I'd layered carefully. Portland had always been moody in November, but today, it wasn't just the weather that made everything feel colder. I parked a block away from the church, not because there weren't spaces closer, but because I needed a moment, needed to walk, to breathe. My boots clicked quietly against the pavement as I approached, heart thudding like I was late for something far more consequential than a funeral. When I stepped inside, the scent of lilies hit first. Too many, too strong. The kind of overcompensation that tried to mask what everyone refused to acknowledge. Discomfort, guilt, unresolved goodbyes. I scanned the pews. Of course the front row was filled. My mother, Imogene, perched like a porcelain statue. My father, Fletcher, head bowed, but eyes scanning like he was still closing a business deal. Beau, my older brother, laughing softly with two uncles I hadn't seen in years. And Marlo, my sister, micromanaging the floral arrangements even as the casket sat in the front. I was in the back. No one had saved me a seat. I didn't expect one. They always make space for each other, I thought. Even at a funeral, they find a way to remind me I don't belong. The service hadn't even started, and I already felt like an interloper. The pastor took the pulpit with all the charm of a man paid to keep things moving. Evelyn May Holloway was a woman of grace, compassion, and wisdom, he began, voice smooth but impersonal, as if he'd never met her, which he hadn't. No mention of the afternoons we spent baking gingerbread in her Vermont kitchen. No reference to her obsession with crossword puzzles or the jazz station she never turned off. Nothing about her dry humor or the way she'd always say, "Make sure your heart doesn't get outsourced to expectations." I had written a short piece, just 2 paragraphs about what she meant to me. I'd sent it to Marlo when she asked if I wanted to contribute. It wasn't included. Not a word. Instead, I sat and listened to a eulogy that might have been recycled from another service. Halfway through, I saw Imogene lean toward a man I didn't recognize, gray suit, tight smile, not part of the family. She whispered something, and he nodded. There was coordination there, not grief, planning. A memory surged. My last call with Grandma. Her voice was weaker than usual, but steady. "If something happens," she'd said, "Quentin will know what to do." Quentin, that was the name. I filed it away like a breadcrumb. After the service, everyone moved with the efficiency of well-trained performers. Hugs, handshakes, carefully modulated sobs. I drifted near the doorway until a cousin brushed past me, barely a nod. No one asked how I was holding up. At the reception back at the house, things shifted from somber to strategic. The laughter was louder, the wine poured more freely. Beau was in the living room with a circle of cousins, joking about some investment property Grandma never told anyone about. "No inheritance talk," someone said. "It's tacky." And yet, they were all talking around it. I watched Imogene hug a woman from her garden club, smiling tightly. "It was time," she said. She was just holding on for no real reason. My hands clenched. Grandma wasn't holding on. She was still herself. She'd asked me to visit 2 weeks before she passed. Her eyes sharp, her questions deliberate. I stepped away from the crowd and slipped into the kitchen. I needed air, silence, something that wasn't cloaked in pretend empathy. On the counter sat a stack of cards, sympathy notes, mostly untouched. One caught my eye. A cream-colored envelope. No frills, just a name printed in small, neat letters. Quentin Ashford. I froze. That name again. Grandma's voice echoed in my head. "Quentin will know." I tucked the card into my purse quickly, like I was doing something wrong. The moment I turned, I heard my father's voice, low but clear from the hallway. "Let's not involve everyone in the family business, shall we?" The way he said it, so casual, so offhanded. But it sliced through me. Family business? I stood still for a long moment, letting the weight of that phrase settle into my bones. They weren't grieving, they were organizing. And I was starting to realize, maybe I was the one they didn't want involved. I woke up to the faint sound of seagulls and an unfamiliar stillness that felt more like surveillance than peace. My grandmother's house used to hum with quiet rituals, kettles hissing, the creak of floorboards under soft slippers, jazz murmuring from her ancient radio. Now, it was sterile, like someone had vacuumed the warmth out of it. My old room hadn't aged, but it had been rearranged. Books I left years ago were gone. The dresser drawers, once filled with keepsakes and letters Grandma and I exchanged, were cleared. A single suitcase sat at the edge of the bed, zipped. I hadn't packed it. I stood there a moment, scanning the shelves. Someone had tried to erase me, or at least make it easier to forget I had ever belonged here. That thought sat heavier than grief. Downstairs, the coffee was already brewing. Its sharp scent curled into the air like a rope pulling me into the kitchen. Lucy stood at the counter, her back to me, methodically stirring cream into a mug. She turned as I entered. "Good morning, Miss Penny," she said softly, handing me the cup without being asked. "You don't have to call me that," I said, managing a weak smile. Lucy didn't answer right away. She leaned against the counter, looked down at the floor, then back at me. "There's something you should know. Your grandmother. She wanted you to have the Vermont house." The cup paused halfway to my lips. "What?" "She told me herself. Said it was yours. Always was meant to be. Said you understood her in ways the rest never did." I blinked, unsure how to hold that information. "But," Lucy added, voice barely above a whisper, "your mother, well, she took care of things after the hospital. Cleared her room. Got rid of letters. A few boxes. Even jewelry." "She what?" My voice was sharper than intended. "She said there were things best left out of the family conversation." I stared at Lucy, heart knocking against my ribs. "And nobody thought to bring this up?" "At the funeral?" "Things change when money's on the table," she said simply, then turned back to the sink like she'd already said too much. The house was too quiet for confrontation. Instead, I made my way to the den. Grandma's den, our den. We used to spend hours there with tea and scones, flipping through photo albums, solving crosswords, talking about nothing and everything. I started opening drawers. Most were empty or filled with unrelated papers. Nothing about Vermont, no deed, no letter, not even a photo of the house. But then I noticed a familiar painting, sunflowers in a faded blue vase. I remembered Grandma once joking it was hiding something uglier underneath. With care, I lifted it from the wall. Taped to the back of the frame was a folded piece of paper. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Don't trust the smiles." Just those 4 words, scribbled in her handwriting. Sharp, angry. Not the way she usually wrote. My stomach tightened. It wasn't just a warning. It was a message. I wandered into the living room, note still in my hand. Above the fireplace, a large framed family photo had been hung recently. I stepped closer. Something was off. I scanned the faces. I wasn't in it. This had been taken last Thanksgiving. I remembered sitting to the left of Grandma, in the same navy sweater I always wore that time of year. But now the space was filled. Marlo was seated where I had been, her hand placed delicately on Grandma's shoulder. They'd edited me out. I turned to Lucy, who was dusting the windowsills. "Where's the original photo?" She hesitated. "It was taken down last week. I don't know what happened to it." "Do you know who replaced it?" She hesitated longer this time. "It came back from the print shop in a new frame. Your mother said the lighting was better in this one." "Lighting. Thanks," I said, walking out before the rest of the anger spilled. Back upstairs, I sat at the edge of the bed, the note in one hand, the absence of myself in the photo playing over in my mind. "You know," Grandma once told me, "the moment they stop seeing you is the moment you need to see through them." I was starting to see it. Not just the erasure, but the performance, the curated smiles, the convenient memories. They weren't preserving her legacy. They were repackaging it. And me? I was too inconvenient to include. I stood, grabbed my laptop, and walked down the hall to her study. The old desktop still sat on the corner desk. I needed access to her email, to her digital files, anything that could prove what I had just been told. I had just sat down, fingers on the keyboard, when Bo stepped into the doorway. His smile was light, casual, too casual. "What are you doing in here, Pen?" I minimized the screen and turned slowly, just reminiscing. "Looking through her things. You always were sentimental." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "But sometimes it's better not to dig too deep, you know? The past has a way of burying people who try to resurrect it." His eyes held mine a second too long before he pushed off the frame and disappeared down the hall. I turned back to the screen, but I wasn't typing anymore. He was right about one thing. The past held power, but it also held proof. And I wasn't afraid of digging anymore. The fog hadn't lifted. Outside the window, the world looked like it had forgotten how to exist in color. Just mist and soft gray outlines. Portland, Maine, had a way of echoing mood through weather, and this morning, it mirrored the cloud that had settled inside me since the funeral. Not rage, not sadness. Something more slippery. Suspicion. I sat up in bed, Lucy's words replaying in my head. She wanted you to have the Vermont house. That sentence had curled into a corner of my mind and refused to leave. My grandmother wasn't a woman who said things lightly. If she'd made that intention clear, there had to be a record, a note, a whisper in ink. I pulled on a sweater and moved down the hallway, my footsteps quiet on the old hardwood floors. As I passed the family portraits lining the walls, I couldn't help but notice how many of them felt staged, curated. It made me wonder how long I'd been edited out without realizing. In Grandma's study, the air was different. Still smelled faintly of bergamot and wood polish. Her favorite teacup, a delicate porcelain with tiny violets, still sat on the side table. I reached for it, turned it in my hands, and stopped. Inside was something small and metallic. A key. My breath caught. I scanned the room, eyes landing on the cabinet I'd never dared open. It had always been her drawer. Off limits. Sacred. But now, the key fit with a soft click. I pulled open the drawer. Folders. Dozens. Some labeled medical, others personal. But one section stood out. Estate trust. My fingers shook as I opened the top file. The first page was a photocopy of a preliminary estate list. My name was on it, clear, unmistakable. But someone had drawn a thick red line through it. I flipped the page, a final version. Same list, but this time, I wasn't there at all. What the hell happened between these two versions? I barely noticed the sound of the drawer sliding shut behind me as I sat back on her armchair, the file heavy in my lap. My name had been there, crossed out, erased, like a mistake someone was too eager to forget. I stepped into the hallway and nearly collided with my mother. Imogene stood like she'd been waiting. Her eyes dropped to the folder, then quickly back to mine. "I hope you're not digging up ghosts," she said, voice too calm. "Was I supposed to be part of the will?" I asked. No preamble, no hesitance. She blinked. "Penny, don't get your hopes up." Her voice dropped, cool and sharp. "You know how dramatic you can be." I didn't answer. Her words had always been designed to shrink me. Dramatic, sensitive, too emotional. Translation, inconvenient. She walked away without waiting for a reply. Back in my room, I sat with the folder pressed against my knees. My mind flashed to a spring day in Vermont. Grandma and I had sat in the garden, the one she kept wild on purpose. She wore her gardening gloves and sipped lemonade. "Sometimes what's fair isn't what's loud," she told me. "You'll learn that." Had she known what would happen? Now even that memory felt fogged. Had she meant it as reassurance or warning? Had she planned to include me and changed her mind? Or had someone else made that decision for her? I needed something real, more than paper. I needed confirmation that I hadn't imagined our bond. That evening, while helping Lucy dry the dishes, I slid the folder toward her. She looked down, froze. "Oh dear. You recognize it?" She nodded slowly. "That list, I saw it. The first one. Your name was always there. Always." I studied her face. "So who changed it?" Lucy's eyes flicked toward the living room, where voices buzzed. Imogene's soft laugh, Fletcher's measured tones. Guests were still lingering. Wine still flowed. It was like the funeral had opened the floodgates for performative grief. Lucy said nothing more, but the way she avoided my gaze was louder than any answer. If this was a cover-up, it wasn't sloppy. It was strategic. I waited until midnight. The house was silent, save for the hum of the refrigerator and a distant creak now and then, the usual sounds of a place trying to sleep. In the study again, I placed the documents under the desk lamp and began photographing each page, careful, methodical. Then I saw it. Tucked between the files was a receipt, dated just days before Grandma passed, from a local print shop. "Updated trust distribution," it read. I whispered the words aloud. My stomach tightened. They had printed a new version of the will. I uploaded every image to a secure folder, encrypted it with a password only I'd remember, Grandma's favorite hymn. As I returned the folder, a floorboard creaked outside the door. I froze. Was someone awake? I sat motionless, listening. Another soft creak, then silence. Whoever it was, whether they'd seen me or not, I didn't care. I had what I needed. The hallway felt like it was holding its breath. I could hear the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the entryway and the faint hum of the refrigerator, but nothing else. No clinking dishes, no whispers, no footsteps. Just silence. A heavy, practiced silence. Bo's voice from last night still rang in my ears. Don't dig too deep. It hadn't been a warning. It had been a threat, wrapped in a smile. And now, I was wide awake with the distinct sense that something was moving around me, something I wasn't supposed to see. I opened my laptop, hands colder than the keyboard. I typed in the name from the condolence card. Quentin Ashford. It didn't take long. There he was. Estate attorney, mid-sized practice. His business page showed he'd checked in for a client meeting in this very town, 2 weeks before Grandma passed. 2 weeks. Why hadn't he been at the funeral? I didn't let my mind wander too far. Instead, I clicked through a few links, bookmarked his contact page, and closed the laptop. I started combing through the guest room drawers, slow and methodical. One of the lower drawers stuck a little on the right. Something was jammed in the back. I reached in and pulled out a cream envelope, the edges yellowed with time, postmarked from Vermont. My name, in Grandma's handwriting, stretched across the front. It had never been opened. I sat down on the edge of the bed, tore it open with more care than I'd expected from myself, and unfolded the card. A birthday card, simple, unadorned. Inside, beneath the printed message, she'd written, "Don't let them talk you out of what's yours." Below that, in smaller writing, Room 306, Ashford. My heart gave a sharp, involuntary jolt. This wasn't just a sentiment. It was instruction. Downstairs, the clatter of dishes resumed. The house was waking up again, but I didn't move from that spot for several long minutes. The card was still warm in my hand, like it was trying to press its message deeper into my skin. At breakfast, I took my place at the end of the table, a seat that somehow always felt assigned. Imogen sat across from me, sipping tea with the kind of grace that comes from years of performance. Fletcher flipped through the newspaper, uninterested. I waited until the table settled. "Did either of you know Quentin Ashford?" I asked casually, like I was asking about the weather. Imogen paused mid-sip, a slight twitch in her eyebrow. "Yes, briefly. Years ago." I tilted my head. "He left a condolence card. Thought it was odd he wasn't at the funeral." Fletcher folded his paper. "We've received many cards, Penny. Hard to keep track." Their voices were even, measured. But their eyes, those told a different story. They were choreographed. No one asked why I was bringing him up. That told me everything. Later, in the hallway, Marlowe cornered me with that false concern she wore like perfume. "Penny, you need to stop with this," she said softly. "You're chasing ghosts." "Ghosts usually don't leave contact information," I replied. "You've always thought you were special to her," she said, arms crossed. "Maybe that was just something she let you believe." I didn't answer right away. Her words were sharp, meant to cut beneath the surface. But instead of bleeding, I felt steel forming in my chest. "She told me things she didn't tell anyone else," I said. "Maybe that's why you're so bothered." Marlowe's lips tightened. "You think there's some grand conspiracy here? Let it go. We've already buried her. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Denial wasn't just dismissal. It was control. And they weren't denying me because I was wrong. They were denying me because I was close. That afternoon, I sat in the garden with Lucy. The air smelled of rosemary and old soil. She brought 2 glasses of iced tea, and we sipped in quiet before I broke it. "Did Grandma ever ask you to send anything? Mail something on her behalf?" Lucy looked down at her glass. "She did," she said slowly. "A card. I never saw what was inside." "Did you send it?" "I tried, but Imogen found it first." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the card I'd found. I held it out. Lucy's eyes widened. "That's the one," she said. "She signed it from Vermont," I said. and gave a hotel room number. Quentin Ashford. Lucy nodded. He came once. Quiet visit. They met in private, out by the greenhouse. I served them tea and didn't ask questions. So Grandma had a plan, and someone had interrupted it. I stood, dusted off my hands, and looked up at the fading sun. I didn't care what they said anymore. I didn't care how carefully they tried to make me doubt my memories. The pieces were there. I just had to follow the thread. That evening, as the house dimmed and the last of the guests slipped out, I pulled out my phone and texted the number listed with Quentin Ashford's practice. A reply came within minutes. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. We need to talk, urgently. As I looked up from my screen, Imogene stood by the kitchen window, arms crossed, her face unreadable in the glow of the pendant lights. I didn't flinch. I walked past her, didn't say a word, but in my head I thought, they can try to erase me from paper, but they can't erase what I'm about to find. The silence had changed. It wasn't just absence of noise. It had become a language in this house. One that said, "You don't belong here." Every whisper stopped when I entered a room. Every conversation ended with a glance toward me. Even Lucy, who had always been the quiet keeper of secrets, moved slower, like she was careful about every word now. It was mid-morning when I noticed it. Every door that was usually cracked open now stood firmly shut. The hallway outside the den was especially still. No laughter, no shuffling of paper, no casual murmurs. Lucy walked past me with a tray of teacups, paused, and lowered her voice. "They're all in the study, have been for over an hour." I didn't ask who she meant. I already knew. I padded down the hall in my socks, careful not to make the floorboards groan. The door to the den was mostly closed, just enough to muffle sound but not silence it. I stopped just beside it, crouched, and leaned in. "She can't know anymore," Bo said. "It's already been handled." My heart dropped. "We all agreed," Marlowe chimed in. "She's too close to this. Always was. Grandma babied her." "She thinks the house is hers," Bo added with a snort. "It's delusion." Fletcher's voice came next, calm, sharp. "If she finds out anything else, we'll deal with it legally. For now, she knows just enough to stay out of the way." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until the air burned in my chest. This wasn't just neglect. This was deliberate. I backed away slowly, quietly returning to the hallway, schooling my face into indifference. I walked past the living room and into the dining room, where Lucy was setting plates. Dinner that night was quieter than usual. Everyone played their parts. Bo opened a bottle of red like he was auditioning for a wine commercial. Fletcher passed the potatoes without looking up. Imogene complimented the roast she hadn't cooked, and I sat at the far end of the table, watching them all. "It's interesting," I said, cutting through the silence, "how sometimes silence says more than words." Marlowe stiffened, especially when secrets are being whispered in rooms with closed doors. Imogene's fork hit her plate with a loud clink. Bo laughed nervously. "Wow, Penny, deep thoughts tonight." I turned to him. "Why am I the only one not worth trusting with the truth?" Imogene straightened. "Because you're emotional. Always have been. You let your feelings cloud what's actually happening." "No," I said. "I let myself believe this family wasn't lying to my face." The room fell into that heavy silence again. This time, I didn't fill it. After dinner, I stepped outside to breathe. The cold air was a slap, but welcome. I leaned against the railing of the porch, staring at the hedges Grandma used to trim herself. Marlowe followed. "You weren't here," she said. "No hello, no pretense. I visited every month." "I called her every week." "You didn't live it, Penny," she snapped. "I was here wiping her mouth, arranging her meds. I was doing the real work." "Did that include changing her will?" Her face went rigid. "You were always her pet project. I'm her blood. You were temporary." "That house wasn't temporary to her," I said. "And neither was I." "You think Grandma left it to you? Based on what? Some sentimental story?" "No," I said, stepping closer. "Based on the fact that she said so, repeatedly, and left clues, and involved people outside of this echo chamber." Marlowe didn't blink. "You're chasing a fantasy." "Maybe, but at least I'm not rewriting reality to suit myself." She turned and walked off, heels clacking hard against the porch wood. Back in my room, I pulled out the leather-bound notebook Grandma had given me on my 25th birthday. Inside were years' worth of letters, clipped notes, quotes she loved. One page stopped me cold. Her handwriting, looped and firm. The ones who fight for you the least will fight hardest for what you leave behind. It hit different now. This wasn't grief. This was greed wearing its Sunday best. I started collecting everything. Photos, documents, copies of texts I'd taken with my phone. Every scrap might matter. Let them toast and gossip. I'd build a file so tight they couldn't talk their way out of it. That night, there was a knock on my door. It was Lucy. They're getting ready to move into the Vermont house. I overheard Fletcher telling the movers it would be empty by Thursday. My name wasn't even mentioned, was it? Lucy shook her head. Not once. I nodded slowly. Let them settle in. It'll make what's coming hit harder. I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and created a folder labeled Operation Ashford. Then I pulled up a train schedule and booked a ticket to the city. The truth wasn't buried. It was hiding behind locked doors. That morning began like a held breath. I passed Fletcher in the hallway, and he was on the phone, speaking in clipped tones I wasn't meant to hear. Something about confirmation of receipt, and then, Thursday is fine, but no delay this time. He turned his back as I stepped past him, pretending he hadn't seen me. I headed toward the kitchen, where Lucy stood by the window, watching the driveway. She didn't even look at me when she spoke. They booked the movers, she said, for the Vermont house, next week. My hands gripped the edge of the counter. Already? They're not wasting time. I didn't reply. Instead, I walked back upstairs, heart pounding harder with each step. In my room, I reached for my laptop. I remembered the joint account Grandma set up for emergencies. I'd only touched it once, when my car broke down 6 winters ago. The account had always been there, like a quiet gesture of trust. I logged in. Error. Account closed. Authorization revoked. Just like that, I slammed the lid shut. My breath came shallow. I walked out of the room and headed toward the front of the house, trying to steady myself. That's when I saw Bo outside, unloading boxes from the back of a truck. I stepped out onto the porch. Hey! I called out. He looked up, smiling like this was just another Sunday. What are you doing? I asked, arms crossed. Getting ready, he said, wiping his hands. Dad said we can move into the Vermont place. Final paperwork cleared. My voice went flat. It was Grandma's house. Bo shrugged. Correction, now it's family property. Funny, I said. No one told me I was no longer family. He didn't answer. I'd like to see the papers. He gave me a smirk that made my stomach turn. Ask Mom, she handles that. I walked back inside before I said something I couldn't unsay. But inside, the fury was building, and not just at Bo. I found Fletcher in his study, the same study I used to sneak into as a child to borrow pens and feel like a grown-up. Now it felt like a war room. Why was the joint account closed? I asked. He looked up slowly. That account was temporary. Your grandmother would have understood. She gave it to me, I said, voice steady. Not to you, not to anyone else. She set it up during a complicated time. It's over now. And the Vermont house? Is that over too? It's done, he said. The family agreed. I blinked, jaw tightening. Which family? Because last I checked, I was part of it. Or was I demoted again without notice? He didn't answer. That night, when the house was finally quiet, I climbed up to the attic. I searched every dusty box and stack of folders. It was Lucy who'd told me once that Grandma kept the things she didn't want, found right where no one wanted to go. Above eye level. It took me hours, but there it was. A lockbox, faded label on top. Private, EM. Only, no key. I carried it downstairs, took pictures of every inch, and brought it into my room. As I opened the lid, taped inside was a note. What's yours will find its way back. Just don't stop looking. I sat there a long time after that, the box in my lap, the note burning through my fingers. Grandma once told me, the law doesn't always honor love, but love always knows its own. I'd spent the last week hoping someone would do the right thing. That if I just said the truth enough times, someone else would finally echo it. But they weren't going to give me anything. I had to take it. I opened a blank notebook. At the top, I wrote, Quentin Ashford, room 306, Vermont house, joint account, birthday card, estate folders, lockbox, every thread. I didn't need to feel anymore. I needed to act. Later that night, as I finished writing, my phone buzzed. A text. Blocked number. They know you're digging. Be careful who you trust. I stood and moved to the window. A figure stood near the mailbox, motionless. I blinked, and they were gone. I ran outside, bare feet on cold grass. Nothing. But inside the mailbox was a manila envelope. No return address. I opened it. A photo. It was the deed to the Vermont house. My name had been scratched out with red ink. Marlowe's was written in its place. My throat tightened. They're already rewriting everything, I whispered. But not for long. The envelope from the mailbox still sat on my nightstand. I hadn't touched it since last night, but I couldn't stop staring at it. A photo of the Vermont house deed. My name scratched out. Marlowe's penciled in. I didn't sleep. I paced, checked windows, scanned through documents on my laptop again. I kept waiting for another knock, another shadow in the yard. By the time the sun rose, I was still fully dressed and wide awake. Lucy found me in the kitchen, nursing cold coffee. Fletcher left early, she said under her breath. Dress shirt, documents in hand, looked like he had a meeting. My mind flashed to a moment a few days before the funeral. Legal envelopes on his desk. I hadn't thought much of them then, but now, every unopened folder, every locked drawer felt like a clue I'd ignored. I grabbed my keys. Going out? Lucy asked. Just need to see something for myself. Be careful, Penny. I didn't answer. I borrowed the neighbor's car, the old Ford with the dented rear bumper. I drove slower than I needed to, watching every turn like I was being followed. Downtown was already buzzing, but my eyes were focused on a 2-story brick building just past the courthouse. Ashworth Bell, legal. Not Quentin's office. I parked across the street and waited. 15 minutes later, Fletcher appeared. He stepped out of his car, briefcase in hand, glancing around before walking inside. I gripped the steering wheel. 37 minutes passed. Then Marlowe arrived. My stomach dropped. I picked up my phone, took a few discreet photos, then leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. They weren't just hiding something, they were locking it behind doors. Back at the house, I dialed Quentin Ashford. He picked up on the second ring. Penny, he said. I was hoping you'd call again. I just saw my father and sister meeting with lawyers at Ashworth Bell. That firm doesn't handle estate transitions, not the ones your grandmother authorized. Something's off. There's more, I said. There's a forged deed, my name removed. He was quiet for a moment. I need to see everything you've got. Meet me tomorrow morning. Bring it all. I will. And Penny? Yeah? If someone forged a signature, that's not just unethical. That's criminal. I hung up and sat there for a minute. This wasn't about being excluded anymore. This was deliberate, strategic. That night, I spread everything out on my bed, photocopied pages from the lockbox, the birthday card, the estate lists. And then I found it, a scanned document labeled Transfer of Ownership. The signature on the form claimed to be Evelyn M. Holloway. I pulled out the birthday card she'd written me 5 months earlier. Same name, same woman, but different hands. The E looped differently, the M slanted the opposite way. Pressure lighter, flow inconsistent. I grabbed tracing paper and carefully overlaid the signatures. They didn't match. I took high-res photos of both, added them to a folder on my laptop labeled Forgery Proof. And then I sat back, hands trembling, not from fear, but from fury. They weren't even being subtle anymore. At dinner, Beau had his wine glass raised before I even sat down. To family, he toasted, and to modernization, especially of the Vermont property. Thinking of opening it up for event rentals. Grandma would have wanted it to stay in the family, right? Fletcher stayed silent. Imogene gave a tight smile. I didn't blink. You mean the part of the family that has access to legal templates and editing software? I asked calmly. Silence. Beau's smile faltered. Imogene's hand froze mid-cut above her roast chicken. Marlowe shifted in her seat. I let the silence linger. Enjoy your dinner, I said, pushing my plate aside. I have documents to organize. Back in my room, I started building a case. Literally. Scans, dates, comparison sheets, witness statements from Lucy, screenshots, bank records, timeline. The moment I labeled the file Exhibit A, I stopped feeling like the grieving granddaughter and started feeling like the woman no one expected to fight back. Then, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Be careful. If you expose this, you'll ruin them. Is that really what you want? I stared at the screen. For a moment, I let my thumb hover. Then I typed. What I want is the truth. And the truth has a habit of ruining the wrong people. I hit send. Then I set my alarm for 6:30 a.m. I stood in front of the mirror for longer than I needed to, tugging at the cuffs of my navy blazer, checking for lint that wasn't there. It wasn't about looking perfect, it was about control, about showing up to this meeting composed, clear-eyed, and unshaken. Grandma had always told me, when you know you're right, don't flinch. Today, that advice felt like armor. Quentin was already outside the office building when I arrived, leaning casually against the doorframe. His suit was crisp, but his expression serious. You ready? He asked. I nodded once. He held the door open. Whatever happens in there, stay calm. Let the facts speak first. The walk down the hallway was silent, save for the low hum of office lighting and my pulse thudding behind my ears. This wasn't revenge. This was restitution. The conference room smelled faintly of citrus and old leather. Fletcher sat at one end of the table, Imogene beside him, her posture as tight as her updo. Beau leaned back in his chair, spinning a pen between his fingers. Marlo tapped her nails against a notepad, unreadable. I walked in without hesitation and took the seat across from them. Quentin sat to my left. Imogene smiled thinly. We were told this meeting was procedural. It still is, I said, placing a small USB drive on the polished mahogany. For now. Quentin plugged it into the projector. The screen came to life. Grandma appeared, seated in her favorite armchair, sunlight casting a soft glow behind her. Her voice, frail but clear, cut through the room like a blade. If you're seeing this, something went wrong. I didn't breathe. I made changes to my will with Quentin Ashford, and only Quentin. The Vermont house, the trust, it belongs to Penny. She is the only one who never asked for anything and loved me anyway. Quentin paused the video. No one moved. She also left a voicemail, he said, pulling out his phone and connecting it to the speaker. Penny, darling, Grandma's voice crackled. If anything happens and they shut me out, don't believe a word they say. It's all been arranged. Fight smart. My hands stayed on my lap, fingers intertwined. Beau leaned forward. This could be fabricated. Quentin slid a folder across the table. Time-stamped, notarized, verified by 2 independent digital services. The originals are stored off-site. Imogene turned to Fletcher. His face was stone. Fletcher cleared his throat. This isn't what she wanted. She was confused. She was clear enough to sign legal declarations with full notary present, I said evenly. Imogene looked at me with eyes that had gone from chilly to cutting. You don't know what this will do to us. I didn't start this, I said. You did. When you erased me. I turned to Marlo and Beau. You moved into a house that was never yours, and now everyone knows it. Then, to the firm's lead attorney, I handed a copy of the video and voicemail. Make sure that goes into the public record. Quentin nodded without looking at me. He didn't need to. We stood. My chair scraped softly against the floor, the only sound in a room full of people who thought they'd buried the truth with Grandma. As we stepped into the hallway, Quentin leaned in and whispered, You handled that perfectly. Outside, the air was colder than expected. I took a deep breath that finally reached the bottom of my lungs. My phone buzzed. A text. You might have won the round, but it's not over. Attached was a photo. Grainy, zoomed in. Me and Quentin. From earlier that week. Entering a cafe near his office. Someone inside the family wasn't just lying. They were watching me. The next morning, I woke up with a headache that felt like it had been earned. The room was still, the kind of stillness that follows a storm you know hasn't passed, just paused. I sat up slowly, the weight of the previous day sitting squarely on my chest. The video, the voicemail, their faces when Quentin played them. It was like watching a vase crack in slow motion, denial giving way to panic. By the door, someone had left a small tray with tea and toast. Lucy's handwriting on a folded napkin. You did what she would have done. I stared at the note for a long time before sipping the lukewarm tea. For once, it didn't matter that it had gone cold. My phone buzzed. Quentin. Legal filings are moving. Let them spin. I should have felt triumphant, but all I felt was tired, until I remembered the text threat and the photo of Quentin and me. Someone inside the family still thought they had a shot at controlling this. Fletcher called a family dinner for that evening. To air things out, he said. Imogene called it a return to civility. We're still family, she'd told Lucy, loud enough for me to hear. That evening, I wore black again. Not for mourning, for protection. The dining room was set like a magazine spread, name cards at each place. Mine was at the far end of the table. Of course it was. I sat without saying a word. Fletcher opened with a toast. To family, he said, raising his glass. And the grace to move forward. Beau chuckled. And to resilience. This family's seen worse and come out stronger. Marlo raised her glass too. Some people only feel like family when there's something to gain. I set my fork down gently. Projection's a fascinating mirror, I said. You should all try standing in front of one sometime. Imogene's fork hit her plate with a metallic clatter. Do not embarrass us further. I'm not the one who forged her name. Fletcher slammed his glass on the table. That's enough. No, I said calmly. What's enough is pretending the truth is impolite. The tension snapped. The room burst into overlapping voices, accusations, justifications. Fletcher's voice rose over the others. Leave. I stood. I was planning to. From my bag, I pulled a small thumb drive and placed it in the center of the table. That's from the bank's security system. It shows who accessed Grandma's safe deposit box the day after she died. I'll give you one guess who signed in. I looked directly at Marlo. Funny how grief makes people forget federal law. Silence. I walked out. Head high, shoulders square. It didn't matter what they said next. The truth had already started doing its work. Back at the guest house, I changed into sweats, kicked off my shoes, and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't shocked anymore. Just awake. Grandma's voice drifted through my memory again. Leaving a table you were never truly welcome at is freedom, not loss. I picked up my laptop and uploaded the security footage to Quentin's secure cloud drive. Watching the progress bar fill, I felt something release in my chest. This wasn't just about my word anymore. Someone knocked. It was almost midnight. I opened the door slowly. David stood there, hands in his jacket pockets. I figured you wouldn't be asleep, he said. I stepped aside. Come in. He sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing his hands together. You need to know something. They've been planning this for longer than you think. I sat across from him, arms folded. How long? He looked up. Before Grandma even got sick, there were meetings, papers signed quietly. Beau was in it from the start, Marlo too. And you? I stayed out. Mostly. I didn't think it'd go this far. But you knew. He nodded. And I'm telling you now because I think there's more stuff even I wasn't supposed to see. There's something they're still keeping from you. I narrowed my eyes. Then it's time we stop talking about the obvious and start digging into what they really buried. I met Quentin at his office before the sun had fully crested the harbor. The weight of the evidence I carried felt heavier than the leather tote slung over my shoulder. As I laid everything on his desk, Grandma's video, the bank footage, the comparison signatures, his brow furrowed, but he said nothing for a moment. Then he looked up. It's enough. He tapped the edge of a legal pad. The judge issued an injunction this morning. All property transfers are frozen until a full review. That includes the Vermont house. I let out a slow breath. It didn't feel like victory yet, but it was something. At least now, they couldn't touch it. Couldn't sell, couldn't move in, couldn't claim it as theirs, while the truth sat waiting to be heard. There's one more thing, Quentin added. We've subpoenaed Dr. Feldman, your grandmother's physician. If he confirms mental clarity, it'll close the loop. I nodded. Let them scramble. He watched me for a moment longer. You know this isn't just about real estate anymore. I know, I said. It's about the lie they told themselves so well, they thought I'd believe it too. That afternoon, I parked across the street from the Holloway home. Bo and Marlo were unloading boxes onto the front porch, laughing like they hadn't just been exposed. A court officer pulled up, dressed in plain clothes but with purpose in his walk. He approached them, served the papers. I couldn't hear what was said, but I didn't need to. Imogene stormed onto the porch seconds later, already mid-sentence. "This is harassment. You people are ridiculous." The officer remained calm. "Ma'am, this is now under judicial review. You're not permitted to enter or modify the property until a final decision." From inside my car, I watched the confrontation unfold with an expression I hoped was unreadable. Not smug, not triumphant, just steady. Lucy texted me an hour later. "They're scrambling. Thought you'd want to know." I replied, "Let them sweat." The next morning, the story hit local news. Family feud. Over 38 Mahler's estate exposes forgery allegations. They used a grainy photo of Imogene and Fletcher at a charity gala from 2 years ago, side by side with a screen capture of Grandma from the video. My phone buzzed. A journalist wanted a statement. I declined the interview, but offered one sentence. Some legacies are guarded by lawyers, others are guarded by truth. By noon, Imogene had been quietly removed from 2 nonprofit boards. Fletcher lost a major investor. Marlo had locked her social media accounts. I didn't feel joy. I felt balance start to return to a world that had tilted too long in their favor. Later that week, Quentin and I watched Dr. Feldman's recorded testimony together. He spoke with composure. She was clear-minded, asked specific questions, expressed her wishes plainly. I witnessed her sign the documents personally and reviewed her capacity on that day. She was fully aware of what she was doing. He paused, then added, "It was important to her that Mrs. Penny Holloway be protected. She said, and I quote, 'She's the only one who never asked for a thing.'" I didn't cry, not then. Quentin looked over. "You okay?" "She didn't just fight for me after she died," I said. "She fought while she was alive." Word of Dr. Feldman's statement spread fast. Imogene retreated, stopped showing up to public events. Marlo and Bo were seen arguing at a cafe downtown, loud enough for a barista to text someone who texted me. David sent me a message. "They're turning on each other." I responded, "They already did. They just didn't realize I was watching. I wasn't on the outside anymore, not begging for a seat at their table. I was on the other side of the glass, watching the machine fall apart." 3 days later, I received the official court summons. Final hearing in 5 days, all parties required. Attached was a sticky note. Unmarked. "Be ready. They've got one last card to play." Quentin furrowed his brow when I showed him. "Do we know who sent it?" "No," I said. "But I don't care. We'll prep for anything. I've got her voice, her doctor, her documents, and my spine." I pulled out the envelope I'd been preparing. Grandma's birthday card, the notarized will, the video and audio files on USB, printed stills from the bank's security camera, even the tracing overlay of the forged signature. "I walk in with this," I said, "and I walk out whole." He nodded. "Then let's walk in." I arrived at the courthouse before anyone else, standing under the awning just long enough to shake the rain off my coat. I wore the same navy blue suit Grandma always said brought out my eyes. I didn't wear it for them. I wore it for her. As I stepped through the entrance, I spotted them huddled near the far steps. Fletcher, Imogene, Bo, and Marlo. Not a single glance my way. They stood like people waiting for a verdict they already knew was coming. Quentin met me inside, a file folder tucked under his arm. "We're set," he said. "Property deed, co-ownership papers, forensic handwriting report, video. The judge has it all." I nodded, lips pressed. "Anything I should prepare for?" He gave me a small smile. "The most powerful thing you can do in that room. Stay still. Let their panic make the noise." The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate in a way that made every movement feel exposed. We sat on one side, they sat on the other. The air buzzed with silence. And the judge entered. "All parties are present?" she asked. "Yes, Your Honor," Quentin said. She reviewed the document silently for several minutes, flipping between signatures and dates, pausing on the video still of Grandma's testimony. "Ms. Holloway," she said, turning to me, You claim co-ownership of the Vermont property and contest the alteration of estate documents. You've submitted a notarized declaration signed by the deceased in 2004, confirming that co-ownership began when you turned 18. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, I said, standing. I didn't know about it until recently. My name was removed from later documents. I believe the original intent was erased. The judge nodded slowly. Please elaborate. My grandmother trusted me. She told me things, left things in writing. This wasn't about getting what I wanted. It was about preserving what she wanted. A beat of silence followed. Quentin added, everything in our possession supports her statement. The court has the audio, the video, the notarized will, the signature analysis, and now the property title itself. The opposing counsel shifted uncomfortably. Then Fletcher stood. She was confused near the end. These documents, while they may look legitimate, don't reflect her true intent. She told me as much. Did you document those conversations? The judge asked. No, but then we'll rely on the evidence. Imogene's voice rose, brittle and indignant. Intent doesn't always match paperwork. The judge lifted a hand. And that's exactly why we honor what's signed, dated, and witnessed. Marlowe stood next, arms tight across her chest. She told me she changed her mind. She said it during one of our last visits. Can anyone verify that? No, it was private. The judge nodded once. Noted. I looked at them, one by one. You tried to erase me, I said, voice low but even. Now you're the ones fading. The judge's ruling came minutes later. The court recognizes the co-ownership of the Vermont property in favor of Ms. Penny Holloway. All associated transfer attempts are nullified. The forgery of any document will be referred to the appropriate legal authority. Penalties for attempted fraud are pending. The gavel dropped. Silence. Not the heavy strategic silence I'd endured these past few weeks, but the hollow silence of people realizing they lost not just property, but control. Quentin turned to me as we stood. That's how you win a war, he whispered, with clarity. Outside, the clouds had finally broken. David caught up with me near the stairs. They still don't get it, he said. They don't have to, I replied. I didn't do it for them. On the way home, I stopped at the cemetery. Grandma's stone was simple, elegant, just like her. I laid the court order next to a single yellow rose and whispered, you were right. Some legacies are louder than others. Mine just had to be read aloud. I stayed until the wind picked up, then drove back to the guest house. Night had fallen by the time I returned. As I stepped inside, a small envelope slid under my door caught my eye. No return address, no handwriting, just a key inside, engraved with 3 letters, E.M. Attached was a note. This wasn't just about the house. You were never meant to find the rest. I stared at the key, pulse steady. I whispered, it's not over, is it? I sat on the edge of the bed, the key still resting in my palm like a dare. E.M. Archives, it read. Engraved in clean block letters, no embellishment. The envelope it came in was thin, but the letter inside was thick with intent. If you've reached this, it began, typewritten but unmistakably hers, then you didn't just survive, you saw them for who they are. I folded the paper once, then again, then set it aside. No more waiting. I pulled up my laptop, searched the name and address embossed on the key, a private legal vault 2 miles downtown. Her name was still on the registry. I called, scheduled the appointment, took the next cab available. My hands were steady, my heart wasn't. At the front desk, I showed my ID and the court paperwork. The woman behind the counter barely blinked as she handed me a visitor's badge and led me to a back room with a numbered box already waiting. The vault door closed behind me with a hiss. I opened the box. Inside, a stack of envelopes, each sealed. A hard drive. A small note on thick stationery, to be used if they go too far. I reached for the drive first, plugged it into the monitor on the side table. A folder opened with Grandma's neat naming system, dates, property titles, copies of the trust, and 3 labeled video files. I played the first, the security feed from her study, time-stamped. There was Marlowe and Fletcher, entering her office the night after she died, digging through her desk, pulling open drawers, taking out folders and snapping photos. I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt, because it proved what I'd always known. They didn't just lie to me. They built a story without me in it. The The last document in the box was titled, Truth Beyond the Grave. It was 6 pages long. A handwritten, dated account of everything she suspected they'd try to do after she passed, including details of a similar manipulation they'd attempted years ago, back when I was still in college. It hadn't gone as far, but she documented it anyway. It was more than insurance. It was the final nail. The next day, I handed the entire drive to Quentin. Add it to the estate investigation. He scrolled through the folders, eyes narrowing with each click. This rewrites everything. Good, I said, because that's what they tried to do to her. That afternoon, I made another call to the journalist who'd contacted me weeks ago. I'm ready to talk, I told her. I didn't give them a sob story. I gave them a statement. Not just about money. This is about how legacy gets manipulated, about what happens when people weaponize family. And then I wrote the op-ed myself. I never wanted a war, I began. I just wanted a voice, and I got it. It spread faster than I expected. Local networks picked it up. National blogs, forums, email chains. By the next week, I was getting letters from strangers, people who'd been erased in their own families, people who saw themselves in mine. Fletcher got notice of a full audit. Imogene was removed from every board she sat on. Marlowe was subpoenaed for testimony after the security footage went public. And Beau, who had tried to play neutral, was caught in the web of backdated documents and early property valuations. I didn't gloat. I met with Quentin again after the storm started to settle. They signed their own endings, I said. The day they signed mine out. He nodded once. You want to file civil charges? No, I said. Let the court of public opinion do its work. My name's already back where it belongs. I returned to the Vermont house that weekend, alone. The porch still creaked in the same spot. I unlocked the door, stepped inside, and exhaled. Everything was untouched. Her scent still lingered in the curtains, faint but familiar. In the corner sat a box of her journals. I took the top one, placed it on the kitchen table, opened to a blank page, and wrote, Entry number 1. I thought about all the times I was told I was too much, too loud, too sensitive. I closed the book gently, stood, and walked to the living room. On the mantel, I placed a photo of us. Me and her, laughing. It wasn't just reclaiming the house, it was reclaiming the story. 1 week later, I received another envelope. No return address. Inside, an old black and white photo. Grandma as a young woman, standing beside a man I didn't recognize. But the eyes were identical. On the back, a handwritten note. You knew half the truth. Now go find the other half. I didn't flinch. I smiled. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was the right to rewrite the ending, and the strength to begin the sequel.